it was in 2009, 2010, and we were just coming out of the massive recession, in 08 and 09. And, the device business was completely decimated. Nobody was getting really any kind of traction. Banks weren't lending money and so on. But what was interesting during that time is that clinic traffic actually was pretty stable, and in some cases actually increased. So it gave me hope that if we could put together the right business model, we could continue to expand this market and actually restart it again. And basically how the model worked is we avoided the doctors having to go to third-party lenders and so on, and we became a subscription model with our technologies so that a doctor didn't have to worry about credit ratings per se. We held the paper, didn't have to worry about tying up their personal credit that was available if they want to do something personally, et cetera. And even if they'd overextended themselves in their clinics, they could bring in the latest, greatest technologies from us under this model. And what that did is it actually forced us as an organization to have a much higher bar, I guess, to achieve, because the paper was with us. So it wasn't like, we could sell something that didn't function, didn't work, and so on. And that because we would be on the hook, and you'd be left with two scenarios. The doctor could either stop paying and you could either sue them, which is usually not good for your creation of brand, or you take the machine back, which is also not good.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Technology of Beauty, where I have the opportunity to interview the movers and shakers of the beauty business, and today is no exception. Today, we're going to get to know a little about Venus, the company that Dom started 11 years ago yesterday, and both Dom and Chad will be talking to us here. I'd like to welcome both of you guys. Dom is the CEO and founder. Chad is the Chief Commercial Officer. Is that right?
That's correct.
And we are so fortunate to have both of them on a Zoom call today. And let's get started with you, Dom. Where are you from?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Rant. We've been looking forward to being on this. Unfortunately, travel restrictions forced us to do this over Zoom, but living in Toronto in Canada, we finally got the clearances that we can travel without restrictions if you have your double dose. So I've got my double dose, and I'll be able to get back on the road and spend time, with guys like yourself. But, it's a pleasure to be on your show. We've been in the industry a long time. We've known each other an awful long time as well.
Yes, we have.
But it's funny when we look back and sort of see the evolution of the industry from, essentially the mid-90s when I was a distributor in Canada, and we represented pretty much all of the technologies that were available at the time. And we also owned a plastic surgery clinic with a plastic surgeon partner. So it gave us a little bit of a very real life experience to understand, what happens at the clinic level. And I think we gained a real appreciation for the challenges that docs have every day, not only with technologies, but just running a business and that. So, we appreciate that. And I think that that's part and parcel to how, quite frankly, as Venus became Venus Concept as a company, and the programs and the way we've positioned ourselves as a company in general.
And where did you go to school?
I went to school in Toronto, business school here in Toronto, focused on marketing. Interestingly enough, on the device side, I started in the cardiovascular care area in the mid 80s, and with a company called Marquette Electronics out of Milwaukee. Mm-hmm. And, you start to learn about, the importance of technology and how the role it plays in medicine. And it just evolved into aesthetics, when aesthetics really on the device side was, really in its infancy. In 92, 93.
Right.
And it was fun to watch it sort of grow and continue to grow, which makes it so exciting. I call it sort of my beauty drug, you just can't get away from it because it's always something happening and always something exciting to talk about. And if you've got a really great team that, are sort of, very open-minded about where to take technologies and work with docs that can, really make it work. That's the excitement here for us. And we think we're still at the, I'll call it the teenage stage of the industry, right? Where there's still lots of room for growth and lots of room for improvements, but we're excited to be part of it for sure.
Yes, indeed. And how about you, Chad? Where are you from?
Yeah, thanks. Again, it's an honor to be on the show, Grant. So I grew up in Pennsylvania, live in Nashville, Tennessee now, Franklin. It's been pretty open for a while, I will tell you. Nashville and Florida have kind of led the way. I married two daughters, moved to Nashville from Florida about 7 years ago. Dom and I's path converged. So I spent about 17 years in surgical robotics.
Okay.
I was with a few companies, Intuitive Surgical, which soft tissue surgery, urology, gynecology. It's become the standard of care. I was there when you really couldn't give a robot away. And now most surgeries are done minimally invasively. And then I spent some time at an Israeli company, Robotic Spine Surgery, that was acquired by Medtronic. And then maybe a year and a half ago, I met Dom. He was on the board of one of the companies I was with. And, when he talked about bringing the ARTIS robot, which I'm sure we'll talk about for hair restoration, into the Venus portfolio, and, basically he wanted to define the next decade of devices for cosmetic and aesthetic surgery by incorporating robotics, AI, advanced vision. I said, sign me up. So, and then COVID hit about 2 weeks later. So, it's,
Great timing.
it was great timing, but it was a great experience to go through, and got the wheels back on the bus and really optimistic about the future.
Well, that's fantastic. And I guess welcome is in order.
Absolutely.
To the business and to the marketplace. Dom.
We threw him into the fire, right?
Yeah, no kidding.
For sure.
Firehouse, for sure.
Yeah.
So, Dom, tell me, when did you first get into the aesthetics arena? Going back,
Yeah,
was it with the 94, was CO2 lasers, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it was CO2. That evolved, as you know, into erbium and so on. And as you know, CO2 was this really hot category. Everybody was going crazy finding ways to use it. And then, you learn a year later with delayed hypopigmentation.
Right.
So we were able to make faces look like a woman that was 60 looked 40, but her neck looked 70, and it was all of the challenges that went along with that. And then IPL came along, as you know, and with ESC back in the day. And, and the thing was interesting because, we worked with Candela and we worked with Palomar that was just getting started at that point. And that's when hair removal came onto the scene. And really that was the first, I'll call it commercially viable, mass appeal technology. That was the good news. The bad news is in the clinic when we were using things like the epi laser that, as you remember, was very large and, a good thing in Canada where you need a building heated. You could certainly build it with the BTUs with the BTUs that you put out. But it was a spot size that, you did hair removal with a 7mm spot size, one pulse every 3 seconds. And I remember our first patient that we actually signed up at the clinic wanted all of her legs done. And we had to charge her $25,000 to do a treatment on her legs.
Unbelievable.
That took 24 hours to do. So you can imagine sitting 8 hours a day for 3 days in a row to do this lady's legs in a clinic. And that made it quite challenging. So clearly technology has evolved since then. But, we've had the privilege, quite frankly, of really understanding how most of the companies in the space, even today, operate and, where their strengths are and kind of where their weaknesses are. Mm-hmm. And hopefully we're able to leverage that into the models and the things that we do with our technology.
I don't think everybody knows about the Venus model. Could you share with us, one of you, the Venus model?
I think it's important to recognize, Venus became an idea. I started to look at, where we could manufacture. I had a partner in Israel, which is, as we all know, a hotbed for technology development and so on in aesthetics. And, it was in 2009, 2010, and we were just coming out of the massive recession, in 08 and 09. And, the device business was completely decimated. Nobody was getting really any kind of traction. Banks weren't lending money and so on. But what was interesting during that time is that clinic traffic actually was pretty stable and in some cases actually increased. So it gave me hope that if we could put together the right business model, we could continue to expand this market and actually restart it again. And basically how the model worked is we avoided the doctors having to go to third-party lenders and so on, and we became a subscription model with our technologies so that a doctor didn't have to worry about credit ratings per se. We held the paper, didn't have to worry about tying up their personal credit that was available if they want to do something personally, et cetera. And even if they'd overextended themselves in their clinics, they could bring in the latest, greatest technologies from us under this model. And what that did is it actually forced us as an organization to have a much higher bar, I guess, to achieve, because the paper was with us. So it wasn't like, we could sell something that didn't function, didn't work, and so on. And that, because we would be on the hook, and you'd be left with two scenarios. The doctor could either stop paying, and you could either sue them, which is usually not good for your creation of brand, or you take the machine back, which is also not good, right? And I remember you were one of the first customers really with the Venus Freeze really early on. And so what we really focused on as a mantra for the company was we weren't going to reinvent the wheel with some new energy source or wavelength or pulse duration per se. We wanted to take a look at technologies that had already been really well developed over the last 20 years and modify it a little bit. I mean, I'm going to call him a quasi mentor, Dr. Gary Lask, which I'm sure you know.
Oh yeah.
I remember being in, yeah, exactly. Right. So we went to Cheesecake Factory in Marina Del Rey for lunch one day, and he sat down and he goes, all you laser guys are jerks. And I said, well, thanks.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Am I paying for lunch or are you? Right. But I took it very seriously because I said, tell me more. Right. And so he said, he goes, you guys don't understand how doctors are wired. Everybody comes into our clinics and are always preaching about, and he goes, I'd like to use a baseball analogy. My technology is like I hit home runs. Right. He goes, that's not what doctors are looking for. They're not looking for the home run. They're not wired that way. They don't think that way. They want to look at technology as like hitting singles, make it a little safer, make it a little faster, make it a little bit more comfortable, maybe a broader audience of patients that can be treated, and, keep moving the ball along along the bases with each of the singles, because whenever you're swinging for the fences, you may hit a home run, but 9 times out of 10, you're whiffing. Right. And I took that very seriously. And I think that we sort of built our entire model and our expectation based on that sort of premise, because technologies have continued to evolve, and the customers, the 14,000 systems we've shipped globally, one of the things that's the common denominator has always been that, you guys are under promising and over delivering, because we don't want to set a bar that is so ridiculously, unattainable that it disappoints, right? And doesn't mean everybody's perfect in the technology, by no means is that the case. But because we have a direct relationship through our unique subscription model with the customer, it does force us to pay more attention, quite frankly, post-sale than most other companies, because they move on to their next sort of sale.
Chad, how does that subscription model work for the actual, for the physician who puts one of the technologies in their office?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. So we take, we try to emphasize, as Dom said, we want this to be a repeat relationship. So we really, we try to lower the financial burden up front. So we take a nominal fee up front to cover a license fee to license the technology. And then it's just pay as you go for 36 months. It's a monthly payment. But what we really try to do is, like, I'll give you an example with Bliss. Our Bliss, our fat reduction device, it also has the RF body contouring and skin tightening, is, we've added, you may have seen, we signed a global ambassadorship with Venus Williams recently. So there's a lot of press and publicity about that, especially around the Wimbledon time, of course. We've developed Bliss Academy. So, for a lot of these clinics, of course, non-invasive fat reduction is getting a lot of legs globally. And so new clinics are getting into it, but it's not build it, they'll come, right? They need some coaching. And how do you talk about it with your patients? How do you close them? So we developed Bliss University, and then we have a pretty strong practice enhancement team. So they really latch themselves onto these customers for the first year or longer. So basically we lower the financial burden. We take a nominal fee up front. It's 36 payments. But what we try to do is emphasize the ROI. How do we increase clinic traffic? How do we provide great outcomes to the patient? How do we create this domino effect so that the next patient can influence the next patient? And then we provide a 3-year warranty. So we just don't want the customer to really worry about anything but maximizing revenue and offsetting this monthly fee that they have to pay.
Yeah, and I think that there's one other element to that, cost certainty is really important for physicians who are, bringing technologies into their clinic, so that they can understand the competitive landscape and price their procedures accordingly. And the second part to that is, obsolescence. As you know, Grant, I mean, this industry, every 2 years there's some new story, right? And so historically what companies have done is said, hey, let me give you a trade-in value on the device that you still have 3 years left on your lease. And, the doctor gets rinsed, at 20 cents on the dollar, or has to now be a laser sales rep and sell it themselves on uselasers.com. And then they still have a payment with their leasing company, and they double down and they do the exact same thing for the next platform. What we prided ourselves on is no matter where you are in that 36-month sort of spectrum, whether it's at 12 months, 24, whatever, if you want to now change gears and you want to move from hair removal to fat, or you want to go to hair removal 2.0 or whatever, we simply do it like a cell phone model. We forgive the balance of the contract that was on the first one. We replace it with the new one. We start the clock again for 36 months. So the clinic, the doctor is only using the technology that they're actually monetizing, and there's nothing sitting in a closet that's not being used that's still being paid for. And we recognized that certainly owning a clinic. I appreciated, the burden of having, these costs that are really not generating any kind of revenue for you for one reason or another, sitting in closets or back rooms while you're always trying to chase your tail to stay ahead of I'll call it the technology advancement curve. And that was a big part of our model as well that I think has differentiated us from everybody else. And the benefit to us on that, quite frankly, is you don't see a lot of our devices in the used market. So we're not competing against ourselves per se. We're able to control our distribution channel. We're able to refurbish those devices, put them back in play for a tier 2, tier 3 customer that for whatever reason may not be able to afford the original full, program or whatever the case may be, or we ship them, overseas to other markets that are more price sensitive than say North America.
Mm-hmm. At the end of 36 months, then, does the practice own the device?
They own the device.
They do.
Yeah, they own the device.
And in terms of the payments, are they spread out, just equal payments, 1/36th, if you will, per month, or is it based on consumption?
Yeah. So what we do, just to be clear, so we have as Chad said, a licensing fee up front.
Right.
And then the first 12 months typically represents 40% of the total value of the contract. Okay. So that get paid in the first year. In the second year, that goes to 25% of the payments, of the total value.
Yes.
And so by the time you get to third year, the payment schedule sort of mimics depreciation. So that's an advantage to the doctor as well, so that they're not getting rinsed, if you will, on the trade-in when they give it back to us because they've got disproportionate amount of payments. We know that the maximum time or the best time to monetize the investment is usually within the first 2-year window. And so therefore the payments mimic the earning opportunity off of that device, so that when they get to the end of year 2, which is normally when we upgrade customers to another platform and we forgive the last year of the contract, there's very little left on the contract. So the doctor doesn't feel like, I have, a big payment that has to be made or there's still value in the machine and so on. And then, at the end of that, the machine always has a sort of an intrinsic value at the end of the day after 36 months. But what this allows us to do is really position the payment schedule so that it cash flows properly with the clinic when there's peak earning periods in the clinic versus non-peak as time goes on.
Yeah, that's a very interesting model, very creative and very user-friendly, and I applaud you guys for doing that. Can you guys go through your product line and what you have? You mentioned fat reduction, so let's start with the fat reduction technology and then go from there, because I'd like our viewers to hear about all the different things that Venus offers, because it's a quite broad offering, and so why don't you guys pick it up from there and start with the fat reduction technology.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think in many ways we're the best kept secret in the market with 12 different platforms that we make available virtually in every category.
Not after this show.
And I think
you're not going to be a secret after this.
Yeah.
So
well, that
lay
I
it
appreciate.
on me, baby.
Yeah, that I appreciate. So, Chad, maybe you can talk about the clinical efficacy, the number of treatments that typically the cost certainty, that type of stuff would be great on the fat, and then I will talk to you about that.
Absolutely. So, we're focused on, as Dom said, we have 12 commercial products, but we're really focused on 6. And I'll start with 2. You brought up the Bliss 1064 diode with also our RF device for octopolar for skin tightening. And so so far, we're in the kind of call it the first phase of launch. Customers have been really happy with it. The clinical data shows after one treatment up to a 41% reduction in the adipose layer at 12 weeks, 27% at 6 weeks, 41% at 12 weeks. Oftentimes, what we're learning from our clinics is they're packaging it different ways. Some combine it with the RF treatment, and they want to do multiple treatments, and they want the patient to come in every week. Some clinics package it as a package of 3 laser treatments, perhaps. But the anecdotes we've gotten back is it's very tolerable for the patient. Our IoT data is pretty promising. As the brand recognition is increasing and the clinics are getting comfortable, it's increasing to, I believe it's now over $6,000 per week. So when there's no consumable, and it's a 3-year warranty. So you start to look at the ROI. If you take advantage of the investments we've made recently in the B2C campaigns, like with Venus Williams, if you attend Bliss Academy and you really understand, how to counsel the patients, how to position it in a competitive market, how to price it, how to create this brand recognition of your clinic, and you're using this as much as possible, we're not taking anything back. There's no direct cost associated with consumables. There's no direct cost associated with warranty for 3 years. So the customers have been really, really happy, and we're generating a payback now in 6 months, in a lot of these clinics. And we have some clinics that are far exceeding that. So we're starting to get a lot of traction with it. As you know, the global market for fat reduction, body contouring is really exploding right now.
Yep.
And, the results have been really good so far.
How many installs do you have on that?
So we're over 100 now, and happy to say we're starting to. Clients are, we have one chain that has a lot, and they're starting to look at second units, which is great. We've seen our pipeline consistently grow. We've also, in conjunction, really hired a ton of people in the U.S. We're making serious investments in the U.S. and North America, and that's starting to pay dividends. So I think, once the idea was to hit that first 100, get a stable product out there that is getting good results, that patients can tolerate, that the clinics can learn how to use. It doesn't have a lot of technical issues, and then really hit the gas. And that's really where we're at right now.
One element to be added to that, just because Chad touched on it, but the IoT, our system has Internet of Things built into it. So we can see in real time exactly how many treatments are being done, what areas of the body are we treating, how long, who the operator is, so we can actually audit the technician that's doing the treatments to make sure that they're getting consistency in the clinical outcomes. And that's really important for a clinic because it gives you valuable information. You can't be in the room all the time. Mm-hmm. So it ties into just how effective you are, the payback periods. I mean, as Chad alluded to, right now this is the average, not the best performing clinics. The average clinic in the US is paying back the total acquisition cost in 34 weeks, I think is the number. 34 weeks. That's pretty damn good. I mean, for a platform that has an ASP of about $120,000. So, they're easily monetizing their investment. We have one clinic that has done over $3 million in the first 12 months. I mean, to a point where I'm asking myself, why don't I have a disposable on the device?
Yeah, but they keep all the profit, right?
Yeah, but we're letting look. My attitude, again, having run a clinic, my attitude is a happy, doctor is usually going to reinvest in himself, and so that's the best possible and the shortest distance to making a doctor happy. And if they're making money, we're ultimately going to make money, and that's why 43% of our customers are repeat customers that have bought a second platform or a third or whatever the case may be. So fat is kind of one of our key leading products, certainly as a growth driver in 2021 and beyond, as Chad had mentioned.
I think, Grant, one of the most exciting things I've heard just in the past 2 weeks being out in the field, I started to travel again finally, from some select plastic surgeons and dermatologists, is that the category has been pretty well established now. So patients are coming in asking for this. They're not necessarily, they may be identifying with a cool sculpting name, because it's been around. But now that the category is established, the patients are pretty open. If the doctor believes in it, if they've gotten good results, if the patient tolerates it well, if they can point to some clinical study or white paper, they're really open to it, especially since it's a better economic model. as Dom points out. Why should we continue to pay high cost of consumables when we can just bring this technology and use it as frequently as we possibly can, and then just pay this subscription agreement? So we're super excited about that. We're also very focused. Kind of the second strategic category is hair restoration and robotics.
Yeah, let's talk about that. The artist.
Yeah, so that's actually that we're pretty optimistic on that. Just from traveling around. We're meeting with some of the largest dermatology groups. That market's consolidated to 25 large groups.
Sure.
And it's really interesting. A lot of them, dermatologists early on, did a lot of hair restoration procedures and then got sidetracked, and it was tedious and manual. And so a lot of them abandoned it. And now you find these huge clinic chains that see tens of thousands of patients, and they may treat the retention, the prevention pharmacologically, but the procedure, the procedure that patients are really demanding and paying a lot for ends up going somewhere else down the street. So we're really devising this hub and spoke model, focused on training, marketing. That's where your friends at Engage.
Mm-hmm.
I actually brought them into a few meetings. I can't think of a better model. Mm-hmm. They brought up the ophthalmology,
optometry. Yeah, they have a hub and spoke. They were on the program also.
It makes so much sense.
Right.
That, and then, the select plastic surgery groups, as well, that are experts in facial aesthetics that could easily be incorporating this into their practice. We just have to show them how. How do you incorporate a new vertical into an existing practice and make that office productive when you're off operating, or you're not there, or you're seeing patients from room to room? So we're getting a lot of traction. The automated device, the robotic device, is ARTIS, which is a form of robotics called programmed automation. So you actually program it what to do, and it does it, which you can imagine when you're doing 2,000 mini surgeries in a hair restoration procedure. It's a perfect place for automation. Mm-hmm. And then our manual device, you may have heard of, is NeoGraft, which we brought in to the portfolio in 2017. And most customers now are bundling these. So I'd say, what we're doing is trying to recreate the landscape of hair restoration procedures with automation, so that regardless of where you go, a patient can have a consistently good outcome. Number two, we're also trying to take advantage of just this growth in robotic surgery. There's over 75 companies developing a robot. I mean, it's amazing. Every time if you Google robotics, you'll find 5 companies that are raising money or have raised money and are close to commercial. And some of the largest companies in healthcare getting into that space. So that's the second piece. And then the third piece is we're really focused on, we acquired this company. This was Dom's idea, Restoration Robotics was an example of a great product, but the company really tried to get too broad too quickly. Uh-huh. And so we were able to bring it on our portfolio in November of 2019. I came on board shortly after. But what we've quickly done is build a programmatic approach. It's not about getting a robot or getting a NeoGraft. It's about building a program around it. And so we're pretty excited. We've gotten a lot of traction with that.
Well, and the other piece to that puzzle is that, as we look at a very crowded, I'll call it sandbox and other devices, right, where there's a significant commoditization in hair removal and wrinkles and cellulite, all of which we have solutions for, and we think very good solutions under our subscription model predominantly. Hair restoration is sort of sitting in its own sandbox, and from an ROI perspective, now that the technologies are automated, predictive, and so on, and certainly less stressful for the physician that they don't have to sit in the room for 8 hours to do a 2,000 follicle transplant. I mean, the ROI is $1,200 to $1,500 an hour, which is very nice compared to, all of the other items that originally placed hair restoration when lasers came available in 94, 95 back in the day. And so it's evolved, and it's sort of the pendulum is sort of swinging back. As Chad said, the spoke and hub model like a LASIK model and so on, is really appropriate for large chains. But even the individual, I'll call it mom and pop operations, now that they can actually have a device that sort of walks them through with artificial intelligence how to do a hair restoration procedure effectively, there's a level of confidence that's being created there. And, we've got a lot of work to do to correct some of the errors and sins of the past of restoration robotics. We continue to do that. I mean, they chose to sell to urologists and anybody who would cut the check, which is fine if you're reporting your numbers on a quarterly basis as a public company, but it isn't great the day after when you actually have to teach them how to market themselves and how to actually do the procedure and ask for money, because it's a out of paper procedure. So I think we took a step back and we knew what we were buying. And the main reason we did this as opposed to, say, a conventional IPO is because of the depth of the IP that Restoration was able to create over their 10 years of existence. We were quite impressed with that. And the most important reason, I think, is in order for a company to understand where the industry is going, you have to understand its past, right? Where it's been. And, the luxury of gray hair and thinning hair tells us, that we've seen a commonality of problems in the industry. Number one, the continued commoditization, as I just described. It makes it very difficult for most derms and plastics to compete, with the med spa down the street that's very happy generating $100 an hour and Groupon advertising all day long. And they're competing with the same branded products, regardless of which company. As a plastic surgeon and derm that wants to generate and should be generating $1,000 an hour out of a treatment room and would be caught dead Groupon advertising their brand, right? And justifiably so. So that was one of the problems we identified. And we think that as robots evolve, we're going to be able to combine the majority of our energy-based solutions with robotic delivery systems with artificial intelligence and machine learning and speed and accuracy and all the things. And that addresses, I think, the second problem that the industry has had pretty much from day one, where 20 to 25% of patients that are treated with non-invasive technologies don't get the clinical outcomes that they were hoping for or expect. And that usually isn't because of the technology. It doesn't matter which company. It's usually about operator experience, fatigue, apathy, multiple treatments and so on. So there are so many variables that get thrown into a manual procedure, regardless whether it's Candela, Cutera, us, whoever, that the outcomes are all over the place. Robots are agnostic to fatigue, opinion. Doesn't matter. If you're doing a treatment at 9 o'clock on Monday morning, it's the same on a long weekend night at 5 o'clock on Friday, right? It doesn't change. And what it does for the clinic, quite frankly, is it gives you, as plastics and derms, and that's where we're going predominantly with all of our robotic technologies that we are developing and will continue to develop. It'll give you a competitive advantage that you guys should have, quite frankly, to separate yourselves from the rest of the field, because we will not sell robots to outside of the core audience. That's been my mandate to the company, that this has to be exclusively available to you guys, because we think it's time that you sort of take back the leadership, if you will, on technology evolution, and the procedures are properly suited for the derms and plastics that we're working on. So that makes sense. And at the clinic level, last but certainly not least, is and this, Grant, I mean, clinics, you find a good injector, whether it's fillers or Botox, and they become a business of their own, and the problem is that many times if an injector decides to hold the clinic ransom and they decide to go down the street because of whatever reasons, it's like a hair salon, right? Many of those patients follow them because they love the way they do their lips or they do their nasolabial folds or whatever. And that's problematic for the clinic. So if we're able to provide solutions in many different areas, different procedures that aren't dependent on the technique of the operator, but rather it's observational more than anything else to set the algorithm, set the customized plan for that particular patient, regardless of what we're treating. We think that we're giving you guys ultimately over the next 5 to 10 years, different solutions that I think will allow you to sort of create some daylight between the commoditization of the industry and what you guys are offering.
That's fantastic. So we've talked a little bit about fat and skin as far as tightening, and we've talked about hair. What other areas are you chasing? What other problematic areas in the aesthetic space?
So one of the areas that we're really focused on right now is a product that our code name RoboCore. It sounds like a bad B movie. RoboCore. Okay. It sounds like a bad B movie, but anyway, it's RoboCore. But we've treated 16 patients now, 90 zones, and we're focusing really on the body mostly. So what we're trying to do now is take a microcoring capability. We treated our first patient with a robot, a breadboard, obviously prototype this week, and we're quite excited in how it worked. But what we're doing is we're taking robotic technology and doing a series of microcoring, various steps, various widths, so that we can actually excise this tissue, okay, very cleanly, and then have a directional tightening. So what does that mean? What are the areas that we're going to focus on? Where we did a lot of our clinical work so far for feasibility and so on is to potentially replace a brachioplasty. So, a female that has bat wings does not need to go through a surgical intervention, leaving a scar and, the pain of recovery and so on. So we think we can do that robotically in a minimally invasive way. We think that we can do directional breast lifting robotically, okay? The same kind of mechanism of action. We think that we can do above women's knees, when you get the droopiness and saggy skin, so that you can't treat it necessarily non-invasively. You can only, minimally invasively, we can treat it, and this will allow them to, not have to go through under anesthesia and all the stuff that, typically you have to do with a full surgical intervention. This is an area that, companies really haven't focused on as much as they probably should, because it's either full surgical intervention, or non-invasive multiple treatments. And the in-betweeners where we're looking at with some of these robotic solutions, and of course, facelifting, brow lifting, jowls and things of that sort. But we want to start first, quite frankly, for selfish reasons. We want to make it sure it was safe while we go through all of these, iterations of the technology. And I think the big one, that's why on the back of the arm, it looks very, very promising right now. And who knows, maybe we'll be able to replace an abdominoplasty, at some point, because of the speed and accuracy of the way the technology can sort of map out the area, hopefully measure the thickness of the tissue. From that, we're working with a third party as well that's in the ultrasound business. And we think that we can integrate ultrasound technology into robotic fat reduction devices. So now, before we actually treat sort of over the entire area, we will actually be able to measure where the thickest fat is and the problem areas are, and actually adjust the algorithms to deliver the energy proportionately to the areas that need the most work versus the areas that need the least. I mean, it all sounds crazy, but we have really strong belief that this is just a matter of time, and we think that we're going to be able to accelerate this process pretty quickly.
And Grant, I'll just add to what Dom said. It was 17 years ago. I was in Atlanta. I met a cardiac surgeon that had the greatest value proposition, with technology innovation. And he said, patients' value is efficacy over invasiveness squared, which means if you can develop a procedure that provides good clinical outcomes and do it in that, like in the RoboCoring context, in a minimally invasive way with minimal downtime, minimal pain, where you're out, in and out, that's a really, really strong outcome for the patient, and people are going to come after that. And so that's a real value proposition. And, one of the things that, we probably won't spend too much time on, the exciting thing is we have a clear view of where we want to go in the future, but actually our top selling products are the Venus Versa, which is a platform that has skin rejuvenation, hair removal, skin tightening, all in one device. It's like a build-it platform for the clinics, up to 10 hand pieces. We have the Venus Velocity for hair removal, the Venus Viva, which we have a new configuration, a higher power. It's a nanofractional resurfacing device, kind of competes with microneedling, getting great outcomes from some of the dermatology clinics we work with. And we have the Venus Legacy, which is, we've got this resurgent demand all of a sudden. I don't know if the product's been out for 7 years. I don't know if it's the clinics reopening.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. Like, we're seeing tremendous demand. So it's fun right now. It's fun because we have a diverse bag that we can go offer pretty much anything a clinic's going to need to build the cosmetic and aesthetic part of their business. But it's fun to just go in and meet with core doctors, dermatologists, plastic surgeons, and say, hey, what do you think about robotics? if you just came out of training or fellowship, where do you think 10 years from now, how do you think technology is going to be deployed? What's it going to look like? And that's where I think we want to go.
So speaking of that, what do you think it is going to look like in 5 to 10 years?
Well, it's funny you say that, because that's always been sort of my vision as to how do we help the doctors, quite frankly, add value in their clinics. I mean, at some point, every doctor is going to retire. Okay. And one of the things that most doctors don't think about, because business isn't their primary acumen, right? They're trained in sciences and they're very good at what they do. And most of the stuff they do is from their hands. But how do you monetize that when you're 65 or 70 or whenever you decide to retire? So we're focused on trying to create sort of a different level of EBITDA return and value as a multiple to the clinic that is driven by the evolution of technology and so on, so that new doctors that are coming in have some real tangible asset value to coming in, other than the goodwill that the clinic may or may have not created under the previous physician. That's why, these derm chains that are being created by private equity, because most of the derms that, in the early days didn't really think about that. They thought about, they're building their product, they're building a very nice living for themselves and so on, but really didn't take into consideration holistically what the value of that clinic was going to be at the point when they're saying, no mas, right? I want to do something else. And so we focus a lot on that as well. And we do believe that in the next 10 years, nothing will be done manually. I think every one of the procedures that's in demand, the expectation absolutely will be that there'll be some sort of a robotic, customized treatment protocol for that patient, specifically geared to that patient. And I think that we're very thankful that we're sort of in the leadership role. I mean, one of the main reasons I did this very unconventional, unorthodox acquisition of Restoration was because they had over 200 patents, that they had filed in a variety of areas, from tattoo removal to hair and so on. And so we think that we can leverage that IP with the skill sets of the guys in Silicon Valley, which is where we're located for the robotic development, and really accelerate the process of developing additional solutions. And by the way, at a reasonable price. We want to make sure that the doctors understand that when we come to market with the next generation of robotics, as pricing continues to improve and our volumes continue to increase. I mean, right now globally, I think we have about 300 ARTIS robots for hair restoration. We think that number should be 3,000 systems as we move into skin tightening, directional lifting, perhaps tattoo removal with the robots, as well as fat reduction, and ultimately facial structure to do a simultaneous injection of fillers. And we've talked about this in the past, where we can map the face, we can create a customized plan for the patient and do fillers like nasolabial folds and, brows and whatever it might be with Botox. We think that that's going to be a huge competitive advantage, again, for the derms and plastics, because that's also an area that's been heavily commoditized because there are so many injectors out there and it's price sensitive and all the things that go along with it. So we keep sort of our eye on the prize, which is ultimately providing the doctor the best possible way to monetize their investments and ultimately create value within their clinic over, next number of years.
I'll add one piece to that too. Dom and I discussed this, and I think we discussed it with you as well, Grant. I came from the spine company, the spine industry prior to this. And, when you think about spine screws, I mean, historically, the prices have come down, but I mean, they all kind of look the same. And, but for decades, it was all about the screw and how do you put the screw in. It was about the payload. But with robotics, a company called Mazor Robotics that was acquired by Medtronic, it became about delivering the payload. Payload didn't matter. It was how do you deliver the payload underneath the skin without opening the patient up, and deliver the payload with some combination of preoperative scanning, pre-procedural scanning, in this case, facial scanning,
right?
Advanced algorithms that can be embedded into a planning software, and then mechanical automation. So a robotic arm can execute the procedure, taking out all of the variability. And so you fast forward and look at the adjacency with like fillers and injectables. A lot of it becomes about the payload, but delivering the payload, right, is very, very important too.
Sure.
And can you assure can a clinic assure themselves that this injector is as well trained and has done as many procedures as this injector? So it's using robotics to take some of that guesswork out, and we hope we can lead the way.
Well, it certainly sounds like you are leading the way right now and very creative with robotics and your financing. And we could continue this forever.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And
I'm
the
sure.
next time you're in LA, we'll pick up where we're leaving off, because I want to talk to you about some more of the AI and robotics as it relates to injectables. You have,
and I got to see the man cave.
Yeah, that's right. Marina Manland, where a man can feel good about looking great.
Exactly.
So I want to thank you, Chad, and thank you, Dom, for sharing your time with us, and look forward to seeing you. Yeah,
thank you,
great.
Grant. Really pleasure.
And we definitely look forward to talking to you about the whole facial stuff, because I think that's going to be a really hot area, and we'd like you to be involved. We'd like you to be involved in that, because it's important.
I would welcome that opportunity.
Yeah,
and
great.
You mentioned Engage, and I'm now the Chief Medical Officer for Engage Technologies and Aesthetic Innovation. So we definitely want to talk to you. And
we're definitely going to keep promoting it.
We have a Zoom on the calendar, Dom. It's on your calendar.
Yep.
Terrific. Well, who knows? I may end up on it. You never know. So again, thank you very much. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today on another episode of The Technology of Beauty, where I have the opportunity to interview the movers and shakers of the beauty business. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next Tuesday.